Cheryl?
Yeah, hey there, Neil. Yep, the president ready to go to Camp David. Big weekend ahead. He is heading to Camp David for that weekend retreat with Republican leaders. They're going to hash out a spending bill and the 2018 agenda. This as the media goes into hyperdrive over a controversial new book smearing the president, his campaign, and early days in office. But is there really any there to it? I'm Cheryl Casoni, and I'm in for Trish Regan today. Welcome to the Intelligence Report. Well, President Trump blasting author Robert Wolf's new book, saying it's phony and full of lies, but will it distract from his pro-growth agenda? We are on it. Plus, the Justice Department launching a new investigation into pay-to-play allegations. Let's first go to the president, the White House, a few moments ago, departing on his way to Camp David. Let's listen in.
Hi, everybody. I'm going over with the senators. We're going to Camp David. We have a lot of things to work on, a lot of things to accomplish. The stock market is up very, very big today. We've set new records, and I think they'll be continued to set. The tax cuts are really kicking in far beyond what anyone thought. Numerous companies have today come out and announced that they're going to make big payments to their employees, something that nobody really had in mind. So we're very honored by it, but the market is good. The jobs reports were very good, and we think they're going to get really good over the next couple of months. So again, we're going to Camp David with a lot of the great Republican senators, and we're making America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Should Steve Bannon be fired?
President Trump just moments ago boarding Marine One on his way, of course, to Camp David. He's going to be meeting with key leadership, the Vice President, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan. A lot on the agenda for the weekend, in particular, what the outlook is going to be for the Republicans in the midterms of 2018. I want to bring in Adam Shapiro. He's standing by with more. You know, he talked, of course, on the lawn just now there, Adam,
Right.
about the market, about taxes, about getting things done. But it's a pretty hefty agenda that they're sitting on right now, Adam.
It's a huge agenda, and, you know, there's the infrastructure, there's health care, there's also the immediate situation, which is raising spending caps, if they're going to, in order to fund the government past the January 19th deadline. But let's start with the most immediate headlines and work a little bit backwards, because the president's off to Camp David. But one of the headlines everyone's talking about is that book, as you mentioned, Fire and Fury, and the president this morning tweeting about the book that he never authorized access to the book's author. He said, I authorized zero access to the White House for author of phony books. So that's one of the things he said. But then Sarah Sanders was on Fox earlier today, and she said this.
He makes it sound like he was sitting outside the Oval Office every single day, which is just not the case. This is a guy who made up a lot of stories to try to sell books, and I think more and more people are starting to see that his facts just simply don't add up.
Okay, so that's the palace intrigue, Fire and Fury released today, but then there's the policy issues. At Camp David, they're going to be talking about all kinds of issues, and some of the biggest names from Republican leadership will be there, but also from the administration. Gary Cohn is going to be there as well, the senior economic advisor to the president. And in fact, Mr. Cohn was on with Stuart Varney this morning, and he talked about the big push that's coming for the $1 trillion infrastructure package. Here's what he said.
There are two core principles in our infrastructure plan. Number one is we are advocating over $1 trillion of infrastructure investment. We are going to get the approval process on infrastructure streamlined in a dramatic fashion. We're going to take the approval process down from about 10 years to less than 2 years.
And Cheryl, the economy front and center for the president. He was talking about the market being at record levels, and he mentioned the companies which are giving their employees $1,000 bonuses. JetBlue among them, announcing today that they're going to do that. They joined companies like the broadcast companies like Sinclair Broadcasting and Comcast, the owner of NBC. They're giving their employees $1,000 bonuses. The president very much in favor of that kind of thing. Back to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the book, Adam, because you could hear that reporter shouting at the president as he walked away about Steve Bannon. That was all the briefing yesterday, and of course that story probably won't go away over the weekend, although they probably want it to. Adam Shapiro live at the White House. Adam, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, well, joining me now is American Majority CEO Ned Ryan, along with American University Executive in Residence Capri Cafaro. It's great to have you both here.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Ned, you know, we're going to get to some of the agenda items, but we should start with the book. Ned, you know, this has been all over the airwaves. You know, Michael Wolff was on the Today Show this morning, says he stands by his story. He says he has notes, he has recordings, he says, and that he had full access to the president.
Well, first of all, Cheryl, I think I would call into question at least some of the portions of the book that I've read, having been in the White House quite a bit last year. The portions about Stephen Miller, the portions about Trump not knowing Boehner, I can tell you flat out are false. But again, at the same time, I mean, knock me over with a feather. Tempest in a teapot. There's palace intrigue in a White House. You know, the fact that people might actually have big egos and competing interests and might actually have infighting and backstabbing. I mean, this is nothing new. It happens almost literally with every White House. And so I actually think in a week or two we will be talking about something else and we'll have moved on. So I don't think this overshadows anything that Trump has done. I think it's a little bit of a distraction, but a week or two from now, trust me, we'll be talking about something else.
And Capri, I mean, I hear you there, but, you know, at the same time, I mean, the president did have a pretty fire response, calling his lawyer, issuing that cease and desist order earlier this week, trying to make a legal case to stop the book. He wasn't successful. Book came out overnight.
Look, I think that if President Trump wants to have the media focus on his agenda, which, you know, there is a lot of success there, particularly on the economic side in regards to, the successes of the stock market, the passage of the tax bill, and the job numbers that have just come out, when he tweets and when he responds in that vociferous way, I think it gives, more fuel to the fire to cover the palace intrigue, so to speak, that Fire and Fury has brought to the forefront. So, I think that it's going to get coverage. There's no question that this book is going to get coverage because it's about the President of the United States. It's about the White House. And it obviously has a lot of, salacious, quote unquote, assertions in there. But, it's, I think, also incumbent upon the White House to stay focused. As much as I think that there is a desire to fight back, that fighting back is, I think, going to backfire.
Okay, well, and certainly, Bannon is known to be a fighter, but he also may be a fighter without a job, as he may be, as far as the Breitbart situation goes. I want to move on, though, Ned. Let's talk about what's happening. Again, another strong day for Wall Street. We've got tax reform in the bag. But obviously one of the things they're going to be talking about, and we know they're going to be giving presentations on this, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, are going to actually give at Camp David presentations to the president about the outlook for the 2018 midterms. Ned, if you were there in that room, what would you tell President Trump about the outlook for the Republican Party?
First of all, I'd say let's be realistic about what major policy items are going to pass in a midterm year. Most of these elected officials lose whatever political courage they might have going into what is typically a tough year for the party that holds the White House. So I would say to Trump, be realistic. But I just wrote a piece on this, actually, Cheryl, at The Hill, about where I think Trump can get some wins in 2018 with or without Congress. And so I think he really needs to explore what he can do in changing some of the tax code in regards to nonprofit hospitals and costs of medical procedures. He can deal with the carried interest loophole through the tax code as well. He can do a lot of different beneficial things that will continue to be wins for his base. At the same time, keep doing what he's been doing on judges. Keep rolling back the regulations. I mean, he rolled back over or delayed 1,500 regulations last year. Keep doing more of the same where it is in his power to do so. He's going to have more wins in 2018, but be realistic. He might have some real problems in getting Congress to make big steps.
Especially, Capri, when he's going to need the Democrats. We've got this budget deadline. It's January 20th. And then he's really pushing back when it comes to immigration. He's made it very clear that any spending bill has got to include any deal on Dreamers, on DACA has got to include the wall. Funding that wall. That's billions, Capri.
Right. No question about it. And, Democrats do have to come to the table. As you mentioned, I mean, we have a pressing deadline coming up on the 19th of January with the expiration of the continuing resolution for this budget to keep the doors of the government open. We have 8 million children on the line right now when it comes to children's health insurance. That needs to be dealt with. The Dreamers need to be dealt with by March. Infrastructure needs to be out there as well. And a potential for a bipartisan, success for Democrats and Republicans alike. But I will say this in regards to what Ned was saying about, the president doing what he can. Certainly, he has, whatever power that is bestowed upon the executive branch to make whatever kind of changes he wants. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the successes of Congress in a midterm election. Congress is at an all-time low when it comes to public approval. And I think that there is general frustration with Democrats and Republicans alike with their inability to compromise, their inability to govern, and their desire to continue to pass the buck. So unless they actually get something done, it's not necessarily going to help them win.
Ned, I got about 10 seconds.
The last thing I would say, though, if we have successive quarters at 4% GDP growth, people are seeing a noticeable net increase in their paychecks, and the market goes to, say, 26,000.
Yep.
I think Democrats are going to have a lot harder time in the 2018 elections than they're thinking they are right now.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy road for Democrats in 2018. They need to come to the table, too. They're not. It's not going to be the big sweep that people think it's going to be.
A lot to cover.
That's right.
And we're going to be here for all of it, all year at Fox Business. Ned Capri, thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
all right.
Sarah.
Well, you know, we're just talking about, the markets, that jobs report from the morning, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ hitting all-time highs again, third day in a row today. The December jobs data did show unemployment staying at that 17-year low, 4.1%. Wages up, by the way, 2.5% since last year, so there was wage growth there. But is all the good news being ignored by the mainstream media as they obsess over the book? Let's bring in Heritage Capital President Paul Schatz, Paul, of course, the Michael Wolff book that we've been talking about over the last few moments, and that every mainstream media network publication has been completely obsessed about, every single detail. Are we forgetting about the great market? We're forgetting about jobs.
Like most of these things since Trump got elected, they have a very short shelf life. The media will be hyper-focused on it. Listen, today's Friday, so the media will focus on it today, probably over the weekend, and then next week they'll be on to something else. What Trump did, what Trump didn't, was the table set properly at Camp David? Bottom line is, since Trump got elected, whether you want to credit Trump or Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell or a combination, animal spirits have been released. The economy, after 3 years of slogging along with tax increases, the economy is finally kicking it up a notch. Clearly, the markets, they were doing well under Obama. They're doing a whole lot better under Trump. Things are pretty darn good in the country right now. The media is going to do their best because it's only, 3 quarters left till the midterms, but it's not until November. So I think focus on what's in front of us. Jobs are good. Economy's good. Earnings are going to be very good with companies. And the market's doing fantastically well.
You know, and it's interesting, too, because I mentioned a couple of months ago, we did see a 2.5% increase in wage growth. And you also saw where we really saw the weakness and why the report really missed expectations was the retail sector. That's the Amazon effect. Those are those retail jobs. That's where the weakness has been. But overall, you say that even though the report wasn't gangbusters this morning, that's good for stocks. What do you mean?
This is the Goldilocks scenario right now. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. The Fed has been very clear. They want to have a shallow glide path on interest rate hikes. This allows them to continue with that at most 1 per quarter interest rate hike in 2018. So maybe they do 3 this year. Everyone I have read, and I believe the same thing, 2 to 4 rate hikes this year. I lean towards the 4 than the 3 or the 2. But this is the perfect economy right now. Inflation it's not where they want it to be, but it's fine. Wage growth is kind of staying. The genie's in the bottle. We're not seeing 3.5%, 4%. And listen, people are going to ignore, especially the media, African-American unemployment is at the lowest level since records have been kept. So for all that huff and puff from the media that Trump's ignoring minorities, the proof's in the pudding. That is fact. You can't argue with that.
That's really interesting, Paul. That's a great way to end it with you. And obviously, again, let's not forget we've still got another new intraday record on the Dow and potentially another record close tonight. So it keeps on rolling no matter what the naysayers keep saying.
Yeah,
Paul,
I think you still have a shot at having this mini melt up in the market. I wouldn't root for it because I think it doesn't end well, but people are throwing in finally. They didn't throw in at 15 or 18 or 20,000. People are finally throwing into the market. So in the short term, it's all going to be really good.
Paul, thank you very much. I appreciate the enthusiasm.
Thanks for having me. Have a great weekend.
You too. You too. It's going to be nice watching that market roll up again. Well, Fox News, we should add here, is learning that the Department of Justice has launched an investigation into allegations the Clinton Foundation used pay-to-play politics while Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. Investigators want to know, did the foundation promise special favors or access in exchange for donations? We're on it next. Another bombshell story developing right now. The Justice Department opening an investigation into whether the multi-billion-dollar Clinton Foundation engaged in pay-to-play politics during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. And Fox News has just learned that this probe has been in the works for months. Joining me now to discuss it, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Bruno. David, it's good to have you on this.
Hi, Cheryl.
Here we are once again. I mean, pay-to-play is one of the dirtiest parts of politics I think most of our viewers don't like.
Sure.
Here we are again. She was Secretary of State.
Right.
They were taking in millions of dollars of donations at the same time from the Saudis, who don't even let women drive.
Sure.
Or they will this year. I mean, it always looked bad, but why reopen the investigation at this point, so late in the game?
Well, there's a new administration. I mean, that would be one. But this is not the first time that the FBI was looking at this. Let's be specific here, because when we talk about pay-to-play, it's relevant as Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. And her last day in office was February 1st of 2013. And when we talk about crimes, investigations leading to criminal charges, we have to think about statute of limitations. And I would note that federal code says 5 years to bring charges like this. And the 5-year period would be February 1st of this year. So statute of limitations could be problematic even if the feds uncover the pay-to-play violations.
Okay, but let me ask you this, because if you're going to do it again, you mentioned the 5-year, period.
Correct.
Fair enough. But at the same time, don't they would have to have something over the last couple of months that they've been looking at, something new. They know they're on this deadline, which means that maybe they're going to bring something up before the deadline expires. Do you think that's possible under the Department of Justice, the inner workings of the department?
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope that there's additional information, not just a change in administration. I mean, but we have to think about this. When we charge criminal charges, it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's been reported that this was looked at before. And when we talk about the causation of this, they would have to show that donations led to non-bidded contracts or actual decisions. And up to date, there have not been charges, and I would think because there's no evidence to support them.
Another piece, but speaking of evidence, though, again, they have found new emails, secure classified emails that are former aide Huma Abedin sent from her government account and from her Hillary Clinton account, sent them to her husband, Anthony Weiner, to print out at home. I mean, we knew that this had happened before, but now they found more evidence of that. That just came to light overnight.
It just got
I'm wondering if there's a connection in all.
Let's not forget, though, those emails that were found on that laptop was the reason that Director Comey had to reopen the investigation right before the election. So the feds, the government, did know about those specific emails that we're hearing now. And don't forget,
maybe they've known for the last 2 months.
One of the biggest issues that have been brought into the media was the Uranium One. And that was a scathing charge that she accepted money, and as a result, the Uranium One deal was struck. But we've since learned that there was a committee of 9 that took part in that approval, and that the Secretary of State did not have veto power, and she wasn't the only one to put that through. So that's why I have to think that it's a stretch that they're going to be able to prove these specific charges.
Could there be, and I'm not the attorney you are, but could there be special circumstances where they could show that there was actually malice on behalf of the investigators? And I'm talking about those that have now been outed as those that were, hated President Trump, were texting back and forth, we get a couple in a relationship. I mean, all of this looks bad on the department. Do you have people that are going to be, fair and judge fairly the evidence when you had somebody that was running the Hillary Clinton investigation, back in 2016, that admittedly did not like, there was a big fan of Hillary, and there's just too many times.
No, I agree.
Time to go into all of
there
it,
can be, we could always look back and reopen investigations, but like I said at the top here, it has to be within the statute of limitations.
There's nothing that can change that.
Absolutely not. I mean, when we talk about the server, right, that potentially could be within the statute of limitations, because when there was the FOIA request, she deleted certain emails, and there were certain actions that took place after she left as Secretary of State. But certainly, if it's within the statute, and that's important, then it could be reopened and prosecuted. And that's the other investigation that the Hill reported was still being looked at. It was the foundation as well as the Clinton server issue again.
Yeah, and the two are very connected, unfortunately, and that's where I think the wires are crossing here. David Bruno, it's great to have you on this.
Great to see you.
All right. Well, it is goodbye bomb cyclone and hello Arctic temperatures across much of the country today. The Northeast is digging out and dealing with flooding after yesterday's powerful storm as millions of Americans brace themselves for a weekend of extreme cold. We've got team coverage with all the details coming up next. Two weeks of extreme weather right now. A snowstorm with hurricane-force winds called a bomb cyclone rocking New England during high tide, causing unprecedented flooding in some coastal areas. All that icy floodwater mixed with frigid temperatures making for disastrous road conditions as the National Guard was deployed to rescue many people from their homes. Fox News correspondent Brian Yennis is in Boston with the very latest. Brian.
Hi, Cheryl. Well, look, this bomb cyclone certainly lived up to its name in parts of Massachusetts on the eastern side and the coastal communities. Some 32 coastal communities experienced significant flooding here in Boston. This is Boston Harbor. The water went up to levels we haven't seen in at least 40 years. Take a look at this video. This is icy water going by the Boston Cruise Harbor ships that is a business here right by the harbor. You see that water going by. Again, this was an astronomical tide. We're talking about some 15 feet, not seen since the blizzard of 1978 at least. This water was slushy and it was cold. The water going into downtown Boston in areas they had never really seen flooding before.
I think we might have lost Brian there. Look, I mean, when you're trying to report from a very cold situation, and obviously it's still below freezing. It feels below freezing anyway in that area. Sometimes this happens. But we do have obviously a lot going on throughout the Northeast. I mean, whether it's here in New York, we're looking at -1. That's the forecast on Saturday. Everyone is still digging out from this bomb cyclone. By the way, at least 7 deaths blamed on these dangerously frigid conditions. We've got standing by AccuWeather meteorologist Brittany Boyer. She's got the latest. And Brittany, the forecast, certainly that's the big curiosity. Where are we going?
Well, it's still going to be cold as we head into this weekend. And, you know, with Brian's live shot, the wind might have caused an issue there. The storm is gone, but we still have a lot of problems that we're dealing with across the Northeast. We look at the snowpack right now across the country. Of course, you would expect to see the snow here over the upper Midwest, but look at this. We have snow on the ground from Georgia all the way to the state of Maine. So we're going to fill you in on how much snow there was, going from the highest totals by each state. Holden, Maine, the sweet spot, 2 feet of snow on the ground this afternoon. And it wasn't just northern New England. You get down into Long Island, New York, Terryville, New York, 16.4 inches. And then we work our way farther south. Keep in mind, this storm system developed toward the southeast, even down toward Georgia. 6 inches of snow and a trace of snow down toward Tallahassee. But we are feeling Mother Nature's grip this afternoon. It is a frigid day outside with the cold air plunging all the way down into the southeast. Look at the temperatures right now. Even Miami, Florida, they should be in the upper 70s. They are only in the low 60s right now. The core of the cold is in the Northeast. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about the gusty winds. The storm is gone, but we're still looking at wind gusts to 46 miles per hour this afternoon up at Boston. So we have major delays at area airports, Boston Logan, Newark Liberty, LaGuardia, JFK, Philadelphia International, and the temperatures right now, it feels awful outside. -10 the real feel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It feels as though it's -15 in Albany, New York. And heading into tomorrow, it doesn't really get much better. You head into parts of, say, the Adirondacks of New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, it is going to feel as though it's -30 to -20. And then we head into tomorrow night, the bottom falls out. Forecast temperatures sub-zero, -11 in Albany, New York City, a low of 3. By the time we get into Sunday morning, we'll start to see the chill easing as we head into early next week. You'll watch it working its way farther to the north. But what is that going to mean? We are going to have another disturbance by the time we head into Sunday and Monday. And with this warmer air involved, Cheryl, we could be looking at the threat of some ice as we get into Sunday and Monday.
You know, it's funny, Brittany, I was going to ask you because I had actually heard, and this must have been a very optimistic forecast, that it was going to warm up a little bit early next week.
You know, here in the Northeast, hearing 30s as a warm-up is laughable, but over the last couple of days, I will take 30 over, you know, I had 1 at my house this morning.
Brittany, I'll take 5 at this point. It has been quite
Whatever we can get.
Brittany Boyer from AccuWeather. Brittany, thank you very much. All right, a little bit of good news we're going to leave you with if you live here in the Northeast. If you're out west, go ahead and gloat, put your shorts on, and go have a nice walk. Well, extreme weather, record cold driving concerns over rising energy prices have been wreaking havoc on air travel. We're going to have the intel coming up next. Well, the CEO of Intel in the hot seat today over a massive stock sale of his Intel shares that coincidentally happened after he knew about a design flaw in the company's chips that made billions of devices vulnerable to hackers, but before alerting the public. Brian Krzanich dumped $39 million in Intel stock back in November, while the company only alerted the public this week. Intel says the two events are unrelated. Plus, the former CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, selling nearly a third of his stake in the ride-sharing company for over $1 billion. This is part of the multi-billion-dollar deal that Uber made with investment companies to pave the way for an IPO sometime in 2019. And in a bid to woo American customers, Subaru is launching a new SUV that's got 8 seats and, get this, 19 cup holders. 19. The automaker's hoping to appeal to middle America's desire for larger and heavier SUVs, where you can take a lot of beverages with you when you drive everywhere. Demand for cup holders, folks. All right, right now let's take a look at where oil is at. Oil actually closing just a short time ago, $61.44 per barrel. Slight loss there, down 57 cents. Taking a look at natural gas, also down today despite that wicked snowstorm, which crippled much of the Northeast. But there's fears today that there may be a hike in gasoline prices as the frigid temperatures do continue. We've got Jeff Locke at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange with details on that. It's a strong fear to have, and it kind of makes sense, Jeff.
Absolutely. Obviously, when you get, of course, you might have a little less driving, too, which may bring down demand a little bit. But that's the forecast, that we're going to see higher gas prices at the pump. But I'll tell you, a bigger story to me is the natural gas. The natural gas people use to heat their homes. You know, you take a look at where it was today, all week, really. It has not seen much of a push at all. But keep in mind, we're looking at the futures market here as opposed to the spot market. If you look at the spot market, for example, the Northeast natural gas on Wednesday of this week spiked to an all-time record of $175 per 10,000 British thermal units, which is the unit of measure. That's compared to about less than $3 on the futures. 175 compared to $3. Even the national average yesterday was as high as, let me see if I got my number here, 1678 was the national average compared, again, to $3 on the future. That's because that's the cash market as opposed to the futures. And if you look at the futures, we're actually expecting, Cheryl, to have warmer weather. Consequently, the March futures, 273, the April futures about 264, and in May, 265. So despite all this weather that you think would be driving demand for natural gas, we're actually in the futures market foreseeing warmer weather and less demand for nat gas. You know, you mentioned oil, and of course, big talk on the floor here at the CME today. The president's move to open offshore locations for drilling. Today, oil, as you point out, down. Is that because, we think we're going to be flooded with oil now from all of those new wells? Well, most of the traders down here don't even think that's going to happen with all the opposition that's out there. They also point out that last year we produced already more oil in this country than we ever have in history. So maybe we don't need so much. But, you know, the Interior Secretary said we don't want to just be number one in oil. We want to be dominant in oil. So we'll see where that goes.
We're still importing half of the oil that we use in this country from overseas. So
and exporting a lot of ours, right, because of the different demands on what we need and what they need. And so, yeah, it's a complicated story, obviously.
It is. You tell them I wouldn't bet against President Trump at this point, but tell them all I said hello. Jeff, thank you very much. All right. Well, as the effects of that bomb cyclone winter storm hit the Northeast, airports up and down the East Coast canceled hundreds of flights, left a lot of travelers struggling to get to their final destinations. Jerry Willis has more on these travel delays. Jerry, and you're inside today. That's the breaking news.
I just came inside. We were outside for an earlier hit with Neil Cavuto, but I lost my photographer. They had to they were getting on a plane, which leads me to the delays and cancellations in this massive storm. Total delays today, 2,303. Cancellations, as you can see, 1,348. I've got to tell you, though, Cheryl, this is better than yesterday when delays were over 3,000. And where is this happening? Well, Boston, Logan, LaGuardia, JFK, Newark, the big East Coast airports, because face it, not only can you not take off there, you can't fly into there either. That's been the problem all along. And the real danger here, you're looking at the wind chill map right here, the real danger is falling temperatures. Look, yesterday I was out, it was 23 degrees in the middle of the day. Today it was 17, but it felt like 2 degrees right out here in front of 1211, and that is because of the wind chill, which makes it feel far, far colder this weekend. Look for -10 to -20. That's what it's going to feel like on the East Coast when you get outside. Now the big threats, frostbite, hypothermia. It's not that you could just lose power, but you could lose a limb in this kind of weather. I want to show folks, though, take a look at this picture. Isn't this gorgeous? But also sort of scary, right? As you start to look at the effect of these cold temperatures on lakes, on bodies of water. Amazing. But airline stocks here also reacting to the news of this massive weather storm. Kind of mixed here. Delta, the only one higher. The rest are down. And I want to mention American Airlines in particular because they just had a plane backfire at JFK. Worries that maybe an engine caught on fire. Not true. Just a backfiring. The plane had to come back to JFK. They were going to Cancun. So think about that. You're off to Cancun on a marvelous holiday, and not so much. You've got to come back to JFK.
Back to 0 degrees. Well,
That's
hey,
right.
you know, the two things airplanes don't like and pilots don't like, and that's ice and wind shear.
Yeah,
So,
brutal.
you know, but
brutal.
good news, your photographer got out.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Yeah, so, and he's on his way somewhere. That'll be comfort to some that are sitting at the airport right now.
There you go.
Jerry, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Well, North and South Korean leaders are going to sit down for discussions, the first time in 2 years. Amid rising tensions in the region, this is the United States has agreed to halt military exercises there ahead of next month's Winter Olympic Games that are taking place in Seoul. Is peace in the region on the horizon? We're on it next. Take again a look at these markets. You've got the Dow, the S&P, the Nasdaq heading new all-time highs just seconds ago. The Dow right now up triple digits, 141 points right now. That is incredible. S&P, Nasdaq coming in strong right now. Obviously, we've got an hour and 12 minutes to go until the close. Liz Clayman's going to take you through that final hour. Meanwhile, tensions still rising on the Korean Peninsula. But news today, North Korea and South Korea are going to hold their first official face-to-face talks in more than 2 years. That's going to happen next Tuesday. Now, the announcement coming just hours after the United States and South Korea agreed to pause their military exercises in that region ahead of the Olympics, which is next month. Big question here, is peace with North Korea on the horizon? Joining me now, former CIA officer Buck Sexton. Buck, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
What do you make of this? They haven't even spoken in 2 years, but they share land. I mean, they've maybe got to come to some agreement. Is that what's behind this?
There's some progress here, but it's a long way from anything that people could really celebrate. This is going to be the beginning, if it turned out to be a real thaw in relations between the two countries. Technically still at war. Technically, the North Koreans are still a state devoted toward the unification of the Korean Peninsula through war, and they're very open about that in their propaganda. But this is what we would like to see happening. And I think what's so interesting is that you've had in just recent days and weeks with Iran and North Korea, two major foreign policy issues that the Obama administration, well, in the case of Iran, I think was disastrous. In the case of North Korea, wasn't able to make any progress. We're always being told that President Trump's tweets are too belligerent, that it's going to cause a problem with Kim Jong-un. Here you have at least an opening that I think has surprised a lot of people. And given what's been said about Trump and his approach to North Korea, a lot of folks are going to say to themselves, hold on a second, maybe he's on to something. Maybe not backing down from the bully in this case publicly was in fact able to get us to this point. Maybe
brought them to the table. But on the other side of that, could this be a trap?
Well, it has been in the past, and that's why it's way too early to view this as anything other than a first step on a very long journey of diplomacy that would, I think, be treacherous no matter, honestly, who is the commander-in-chief. The North Koreans have really mastered doing a lot that the international community gets upset about, and then they come forward. They say, okay, this stretches back into the 90s. Kim Jong-il, we'll talk to you. Let's do something. And they really took the Clinton administration, Bush, HW, and then also the Obama administration to school on all of these issues. So it's been something that the North Koreans have had a lot of practice at. And I think this might be another head fake, if you will.
Okay, now you mentioned President Trump, and that maybe that tough talk and those tough tweets actually has made a difference, and maybe that is affecting the North. But we also have the sanctions. You have to bring up Ambassador Nikki Haley right now, our ambassador to the United Nations. She's been very tough on North Korea. They've asked for sanctions to be increased. We haven't completely cut off their oil, but almost. And we've now heard that the Chinese are actually building refugee camps along their border with North Korea.
Right. Well, the Chinese are really fearful of an implosion of the North Korean state because there would be a massive refugee crisis across the border from North Korea into China. So the Chinese watch this all very in a precarious way.
But what does implosion mean, though?
Well, it would mean that there was some kind of a coup and the regime falls apart, and all of a sudden the whole thing has a, if you will, a Tahrir Square moment. By the way, we are miles and miles away from that happening, but I'm just saying the Chinese always, in a long-term view, are worried about that. As for us and Nikki Haley and sanctions, yeah, this is what's supposed to happen when you tighten access to international finance, banking sanctions, raw material sanctions. The actions the Trump administration has taken here seem to be bearing fruit, and I think there's just many in the foreign policy establishment who are having a moment of, but wait, he does that stuff on Twitter, and it's like, well, whether that works or not, you have to look at the results, and right now it looks like Trump has gotten a beachhead for diplomacy with North Korea that his predecessor in 8 years was incapable of getting.
Now, there are some that said that the biggest concern, the biggest problem that Donald Trump was going to have going into office was going to be North Korea. But there may be bigger problems at home. I don't know.
There's a lot of problems in the world, that's for sure.
Buck Sexton, Buck, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, despite a strong holiday sales season, many of the most established and well-known retailers are closing stores and cutting jobs. We're going to have the details next. So it was a great holiday season for retailers in 2017. Sales up nearly 5%. But news today that two of the nation's biggest department stores, Macy's and Sears, are cutting thousands of jobs, and they're closing more than 100 stores. Joining me now with details on this is our own Deirdre Bolton.
Rough news indeed. So Amazon, all these other digital players, I mean, they're so sharp that these bricks and mortar stores really can't make too many management mistakes. Now, in the case of Sears, Sears has just been struggling for years. You know, the hedge fund manager, Eddie Lampert, he became the CEO and the chairman of Sears. He's been trying to turn the company around, but most analysts agree that his changes were too little, too late. So he did experiment with blending some old and some new. In one move that analysts applauded, you know, he allowed some Sears brands to be sold on Amazon, and then he actually outright sold big brands that belonged to Sears, the Craftsman tool line, one of note, to Stanley Black & Decker. Now, even with those efforts, Sears sales down 45% in the past 4 years. Debt load topping $4 billion. The company is losing more than $1 billion annually. So as a result, more than 100 Sears and Kmart stores are going to be closing in the spring. The list of unprofitable stores, basically 39 for Sears in 22 states, 64 for Kmart in 29 states. Liquidation sales at the stores, they're going to be starting actually next week. And then most will be basically shut down by the end of April. So sum total, Sears is going to have fewer than 940 stores across the country, and that is down from 3,510 just 6 years ago. Kmart hit even harder. It's going to have about 400 stores left by May of this year, and that is down 941. 2 years ago. Macy's is also going to have fewer stores. It is also cutting 5,000 jobs, so it's going to be closing 11 stores this year, and Macy's, just keeping the tallies here, a total of 124 stores have been shut since 2015. So it is worth noting, though, Macy's is a little bit different. It did have a strong holiday sales season. It actually raised its earnings guidance for the year. So, Cheryl, it is a mixed bag, and I just want to highlight some retailers that are actually thriving and opening new stores, so the opposite of what we just talked about. Apple, Costco, Sephora, TJ Maxx, and there just seems to be this different, I don't know if you feel it as well, between shopping and buying. So what a lot of retail analysts are talking about, if you and I are just buying paper towels or we're buying supplies, that's so easily done now online. Shopping, though, is a different experience, and they say for the people who still want to touch and feel the goods, or if it's clothing, try on the merchandise, that's why we're seeing stocks such as TJ Maxx, for example. People like to go, they like to find bargains, it's kind of part of the game. And so TJ Maxx is, in a way, offering consumers a particular experience that they can't get online. And analysts are saying those are the stores that are going to be protected a little bit from this new digital world.
Yeah, I mean, and with the story of Macy's, too, Macy's was a little late to the party when it came to being online when Terry Lundgren was the CEO. He has obviously just left as chairman just a few weeks ago. So, you know, those that didn't catch up with the online craze, if you will, the Amazons of the world, are paying the price still to this day.
In fairness, though, to Lundgren and to Macy's, I think they recognized that they were late to the game. They tried to hurry up. Eddie Lampert, a lot of analysts are saying at Sears, almost refused to kind of see the writing on the wall, refused to take responsibility.
Deirdre, thank you so much. All right, real quick, catch me every day, 5 a.m. Eastern Time on FBN.